Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Writing and Publishing a DIY Guide. And in this episode I want to talk about writing great characters, and specifically maybe the pitfalls to avoid when you're writing characters. And now the present Mrs. Stanley will tell me off for using these terms, but you've probably heard them, and they are the terms a Mary Sue or a Gary Stew. Now, you probably know what this means. You must have heard it. It's a very popular character type in YA novels sometimes, and it can find its way into mainstream literature as well. Not everybody will agree, but a lot of people, for example, accuse Rey in The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker of being a Mary Sue. Now, what does that actually mean? And it's basically a problem with characters in fiction whereby they basically succeed at more or less everything they try to do effortlessly and with very little explanation of why they're able to succeed. For sort of children's books and for the younger end of the YA market, maybe people don't mind so much about this sort of thing. But when you get into more serious books, the trend now is for people to want characters who have to earn their successes. So that's what you're looking to do. If you think about the difference between Rey and Luke Skywalker, for example, in the Star Wars example, Luke has to go through a lot of training and a lot of failures, and he loses a lot of battles really before he can get to the end of his narrative successfully. Rey, on the other hand, often seems to get things right first time and quickly be able to use a lightsaber. Even in the early on, she's able to fight Kylo Ren, who supposedly had lots of training with a lightsaber, and she's almost never touched one. You could argue it's because of some mystical reason, but from what you see in the films, it doesn't seem earned. Now, if you compare that, for example, to who I think is a great character, and that is Arya from Game of Thrones. Whether you watch the series or you read the books, Arya does not have an easy time of it. She starts out in Winterfell. She ends up seeing her family disbanded, and minor spoilers here, she ends up seeing somebody quite important to her beheaded. She ends up living on the streets of King's Landing, fighting for survival. She ends up captured. She ends up moved to the north. She ends up escaping, getting captured again. She ends up joining the Faceless Assassins and going through a quite brutal training regime. Yes, she becomes very skilled and very powerful by the end of the series, but you feel like she's earned it. She's overcome difficulties, and that's what you need to do. You need your characters to fail. You need your protagonists to fail, and you need your villains to succeed sometimes. You really got to think of it as good characters who are interesting to follow tend to fail more than they succeed. But every time they fail at something, every obstacle they fail to overcome, they should learn something. You know, we're talking about here character development, and it's kind of like if you think about, say you bought Elden Ring, notoriously difficult video game but you hacked it so that you started the game at absolutely max level and you could walk through the entire game one-shotting everything effortlessly. It wouldn't be very interesting to play, and it wouldn't be much fun. And the same is true of characters in fiction. If you start out with a character who seems to be almost completely invulnerable, seems to be able to overcome whatever challenges are put in front of them every time, first time, that's not a very interesting character to follow, because they become very predictable. You'll hear people talk about something called plot armor. And it's something that you want to try and avoid, but you will end up in a situation where you cannot avoid a little bit of plot armor, but it's something you need to try and minimize. You're going to have characters in your novel who you cannot afford to die because they're reader favourites. I've got characters in my own Deaththorn arc series, which I know, as much as I love to write subversively and I love to shock people and kill people off they don't expect, there's certain characters who I know, if I kill them, it will ruin the series for everyone. And you'll have these same sort of characters yourself. What you need to do is have characters in there who can be killed, but don't necessarily make it obvious that they can be killed. Or maybe you've had a character in the story for a good chunk of the book or the series, and then you make me think, they've actually done everything they need to do, and even if they're a popular character, maybe killing them is the right thing to do. Even if they have got what people term as plot armor, and they appear to be, it's a bit like when you watch Han and Chewie running through the Death Star while there's hundreds of stormtroopers shooting at them. Later we find out that actually it was all a plan and they were told to miss, which is a point lots of people miss when they're watching Star Wars. But if you think about it, Vader suggests to Tarkin that they'd intentionally allow them to escape so that they could follow them to the rebel base. They put a tracking device on the Millennium Falcon. That's not going to work if they shoot Han, the pilot. But nonetheless, people look at characters in Star Wars, Luke, Leia, Han, throughout the series, and they see them as having plot armor. They can't be hit by anything. And it happens in other series too. So maybe what you need to do is be prepared to have characters who do get hit, and do get hurt, and do get injured. The problem then is you've got to consider their healing time for whatever's happened to them. If somebody takes a sword in the belly, you can't then have them climbing up a mountain and running and horse riding and fighting somebody else the same day. You need to think about the consequences of injuries and such like injuries, illnesses, maybe anything like that. These again, we'll talk about obstacles that you're going to put in your character's way. Really, your character you should be asking yourself, what do they want? What's stopping them from getting it? What is the obstacle to them achieving whatever they're trying to achieve? And how are they going to overcome that obstacle? How are they going to overcome that obstacle? And again, throughout this process here, and throughout their journey, they should fail and learn from their failures, and then get closer to achieving whatever it is they're trying to achieve every time. You need your characters to go on a journey, not just a physical journey, but on a developmental journey, and become a different character by the end of the process. And you also, and this is a key thing about writing good characters, as much as an agent or a publisher, an editor, will be able to tell within 4 lines of your book whether your book has got the potential by the voice. That's what they're looking for, the voice. You need the same thing for your characters. Your characters should have a distinct voice or a way of talking. And I'll do another video on dialogue because it's a whole other topic of discussion. But you really need to give your characters a distinctive voice. You should be able to write a whole page of dialogue with all your main characters talking, but without identifying on that page who's talking, and the reader should be able to tell who's saying what just by how it's said and the character's voice. Again, it's I'll do another video on dialogue and how to write it and how not to write it. But when you get onto the dialogue and you get onto the getting your characters talking, you need to give those main characters particularly a distinctive voice so people can tell immediately that's who they are and it's consistent. All these things here, you need to be consistent. When your character's going on this journey of development and changing, it needs to make sense. You need to have your characters, you need to really have them progress in whatever it is they're learning or whatever quest they're on in a logical way that kind of makes sense. And that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. Key points are, obviously, avoid the kind of can't fail, great at everything characters. They're not interesting. Try and give them a developmental journey. Allow them to fail. Let people they care about be killed and let them experience strong emotions to that. Let them grieve. Let them get angry, and try and show this through your writing. And again, that's going back to that video I said about show and don't tell. Make sure they've got a distinctive voice so that you can tell who's talking even without being told. And make sure that their development and their voice and their personality is consistent. If you've written a good character and you've got a solid few chapters down of them going through this process, then from that point onwards, your character almost takes on a mind of their own, and you simply need to put an obstacle or a situation in the way for them to deal with. And you can't necessarily then make up how they're going to solve it, because what you've written already, the personality, the voice, the character, the type of person they are, you've already defined, and you've got to be consistent with that. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. In ways that makes it easier for you. Once you've got a solid character, well rounded out, and you know who they are, then you know how they're going to go on to solve the obstacles that you put in front of them, and you know how they're going to achieve their objectives. Hope that's been helpful. Sorry if it seems a bit of a disjointed one this time. It's a lot to cover, and I want to keep these short. Hope you've enjoyed it. Do like and subscribe if you've found it useful, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one.